All right, so today we're going deep on Andrew Tate, right? We've got excerpts from this interview he did on the Full Send podcast.
Yeah, and it's a really fascinating one, even if you haven't been like following his case super
All
closely.
right.
Tate's become like this huge figure in discussions about masculinity and fame and all this online stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And this interview, I think, gives us a chance to hear him unpack all that in his own words.
Totally. Yeah, no filters
No
there.
filters. So that's kind of our goal today, right? To go beyond just like the sound bites and the headlines and try to figure out what makes this guy tick.
What's the method to his madness?
Like, what are the core ideas that are driving his rhetoric?
Right, and why does he resonate with so many people?
Yeah.
Even people who like completely disagree with him.
Yeah, it's like we're trying to understand this cultural phenomenon.
Yeah,
Like you can't just dismiss him as like just a provocateur, you know?
totally. I think there's a lot more going on.
Okay, so let's unpack some of this. And I think a good place to start is with his take on fame.
Yeah.
He throws around this term gatekeeping a lot,
Right.
claiming that traditional paths to fame, like, sports or Hollywood, are rigged against people like him.
Yeah, so he's basically saying those systems have like controls built in,
Yeah,
right? Athletes have their managers and actors have agents and studios.
right.
It's like everybody's got somebody kind of pulling strings
Yeah.
who can shut you down if you don't follow the rules.
Yeah, and Tate claims he found a way to bypass all that.
Okay.
He calls it clipping culture, which he actually believes he invented.
Oh, wow.
And that's where it gets interesting.
Yeah, what is that?
So he's talking about using controversy and like outrageous statements to go viral.
Oh, so it's not just about being liked.
No, it's not just about being liked.
It's about getting a reaction.
It's about generating a reaction, any reaction.
Yeah.
And, think about how like little snippets of videos or sound bites get shared online all the time. That's clipping culture in action, right?
That's true, yeah.
And he even uses his Instagram ban as an example.
Yeah,
He was kicked off the platform for comments about women and age,
right.
but he claims that only amplified his message.
Interesting.
It's like pouring gasoline on a fire.
Yeah.
The more people tried to silence him,
Yeah.
the more his clips circulated.
Creating this kind of like feedback loop
Yeah.
of like outrage and engagement.
Exactly, and it doesn't stop there. He even sees the footage of his arrest by the BBC as part of his strategy.
Wow.
Just another clip in his arsenal.
That's a pretty bold statement.
It is.
It kind of makes you think about the nature of fame these days, right? Like in the digital age.
Total.
Is he like a master manipulator of the attention economy?
Yeah,
Or is he just riding this wave of controversy he can't really control?
right. And he actually goes on to talk about this shift in his content.
Okay.
Moving away from this earlier focus on females to what he calls important subjects.
Yeah.
And he almost suggests that this is what got him in trouble.
So it's like he's saying being controversial within certain boundaries is okay.
Yeah.
But once you start like poking the bear on like bigger issues,
Yeah.
then you become a threat.
Yeah, and he ties this into his theory of free speech,
Oh, interesting.
which is pretty wild.
Yeah.
He basically argues that your ability to speak freely is directly tied to your insignificance.
What does that mean?
So the larger your audience,
Yeah.
the less freedom you have.
That's a fascinating point.
Right.
It kind of resonates with that whole distrust of authority thing you see a lot online.
Totally.
But it also begs the question, like, how do you balance free speech with the potential for harm,
Yeah.
especially on these platforms with billions of users?
Right, and he compares himself to Icarus flying too close to the sun during his time in Dubai,
Oof.
almost like he predicted his own downfall.
Yeah, there's definitely like a sense of hubris there.
Yeah.
But it also shows because a self-awareness that people don't often talk about with Tate. Like he gets the game he's playing, even if he sometimes seems to get caught up in it.
Right, so let's talk about his influence, because he uses this really vivid analogy
Okay.
to explain why he thinks he's become so powerful. He compares himself to a tornado.
A tornado. Okay.
And he says you need both hot and cold air to create that kind of force.
Okay.
So he's suggesting it's not just about his supporters.
Yeah.
It's also about his detractors.
So the people who hate him,
Yeah.
who like completely disagree with him, are actually contributing to his rise.
They're fueling the fire.
Wow.
And he points out that, like, no one else was saying the things that he believed to be true,
Right.
which gave him this unique position.
Okay.
And get this, he had a 3-stage plan for his rise to fame.
A 3-stage plan.
Get attention,
Okay.
get canceled,
Yeah.
and then move people to alternative platforms.
It's hard to say if that was intentional or just how things played out,
Right.
but we've definitely seen it happen before.
It's a pattern.
Like, think about Elon Musk buying Twitter and how that's given a platform to people who were banned from other places.
And then there's Trump's re-election bid.
Right.
Another example of someone who thrives on controversy and division.
It's almost like a playbook for navigating the culture these days.
Okay, so let's get into something a little more personal.
Okay.
Tate's views on happiness, because he claims that his dopamine receptors are fried from a life of these extreme highs and lows,
Right.
making it hard for him to find joy in just normal, everyday stuff.
So it's like he's reached this point where just like regular pleasures don't do it for him anymore.
Yeah, and he tells this funny story about Shazamming every song at dinner.
Shazamming every song.
Completely out of touch with American culture after living in Romania for so long.
It's like he's become a cultural alien.
Totally.
Disconnected from all the stuff that most people just take for granted.
Yeah, but here's the thing. He admits the only TV he watches is cooking shows.
Cooking shows!
Which he finds both frustrating and addicting.
So it's like he craves that simplicity.
Yeah.
Even though it clashes with his whole larger-than-life persona.
Totally. And then he goes on to say this really controversial thing about happiness being a sop.
Hassan.
Especially for men. He argues that men should strive for competence and making others happy,
Okay.
not their own personal happiness.
So this is where his ideas about traditional masculinity really come in.
Totally.
He's advocating for this more stoic approach.
Right.
Where duty and achievement come before your own feelings.
And then he gets into male-female dynamics.
Okay.
Arguing that women are like a litmus test reflecting a man's value.
A litmus test.
He even says men who get cheated on deserve it.
Wow, that's
It's a pretty harsh take.
it is.
And we should acknowledge that this is just one perspective.
Right.
You know, it's important to consider other viewpoints and challenge those assumptions.
Absolutely.
But he goes on to say, love is worthless without competence.
Oh, okay.
Like, he compares it to having a weak brother who can't protect you in a fight.
So his point seems to be that love isn't enough on its own. It needs to be backed up by capability, by action,
Right.
a willingness to protect and provide.
And he contrasts men as competency objects, judged by their capabilities,
Okay.
with women as sex objects, judged by their appearance.
That's a very traditional view of gender roles
Yeah.
that feminists have been challenging for decades.
Right.
But it's important to understand how those beliefs, even if they're outdated, can shape how someone sees the world.
And then he connects this to how Instagram and other online platforms have changed dating.
Yep.
He believes they've created this like globalized, hyper-competitive sexual marketplace.
So he's saying it's even harder for men now
Yeah.
to be seen as attractive.
Right. They feel this pressure to achieve a certain level of success.
It makes sense.
And his advice to men is basically to focus on self-improvement,
Okay.
achieving success in all areas of life.
Instead of obsessing over women.
Right, rather than obsessing over women or using like pickup artist tactics.
That resonates with a lot of guys,
Yeah.
regardless of how they feel about Tate.
There's a sense of empowerment there. Like,
Yeah.
you're taking control of your own life and striving for excellence.
Right. But there's also a darker side to his rhetoric that we can't ignore.
Yeah. We got to talk about this.
His use of the word gay.
Yeah.
To criticize what he sees as like weak or feminine behavior in men.
And this is where things get really tricky.
Yeah,
We need to approach this topic carefully.
for sure.
He uses the term in this derogatory way,
Yeah.
targeting behaviors like spending too much time with girlfriends, making TikToks.
Or being overly emotional after a breakup.
And he contrasts this with his image of these high-achieving men like Elon Musk,
Right.
who don't have time for this frivolous stuff.
It's a harmful and outdated view
Yeah.
that links masculinity with stoicism and not showing your feelings.
Right.
While also demonizing femininity and all these homophobic stereotypes.
And we want to be super clear here.
Yeah.
We are not endorsing this viewpoint at all.
Not at all.
We're presenting it as part of his rhetoric for you to think about and interpret.
That's right.
It's important to remember that words have power.
For sure.
And using terms like gay in this context can have real-world consequences for LGBTQ plus people.
Absolutely.
Okay, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about Tate's views on relationships.
Okay.
He has some really strong opinions about children.
Yeah.
He claims that relationships aren't truly serious unless you have kids.
Interesting.
He believes children represent this tangible commitment
Okay.
and a legacy,
Right.
whereas other relationship milestones like marriage or anniversaries are superficial without them.
I see.
And his responses to questions about relationship advice are hilarious.
Okay.
But blunt, He basically dismisses the whole idea of romantic entanglements.
Yeah.
Emphasizing achievement above all else.
It fits with his whole philosophy.
Yeah.
Prioritizing achievements and legacy over emotions and experiences.
Okay, so let's move on to his online presence.
Right.
We got to discuss his reinstatement on Twitter under Elon Musk. He was really quick to point out how fast it happened, and he believes the original ban was totally unjustified.
It really shows you the power dynamics at play in the digital world.
Right. Individuals like Elon Musk have so much influence over these platforms.
Yeah.
But he's still banned on YouTube, and he expressed hope for reinstatement.
Okay.
He even tells the story about meeting the new YouTube CEO at an event.
An event about what?
Featuring Trump content.
That's ironic. It's pretty ironic, right, considering his ban.
It is. It makes you wonder about the consistency of these platforms' policies.
Totally.
Are they really for free speech?
Yeah.
Or are they just reacting to public pressure and politics?
He even calls for a blanket pardon of banned users.
A blanket pardon.
Similar to what Elon Musk did on Twitter.
That's a pretty bold idea.
It raises all these questions about content moderation.
Yeah.
Who gets to decide what's acceptable, and where do we draw the line between free expression and harmful content?
Those are tough questions.
All right, let's talk about some figures Tate admires.
He expresses a lot of respect for Dana White.
Dana White, the UFC guy.
Yeah, specifically for his stance on free speech within the UFC.
Interesting.
He uses Sean Strickland and Bryce Mitchell as examples.
Oh, the fighters?
Yeah, fighters who are allowed to express themselves freely.
Even if their views are controversial.
Even if their views are controversial.
This goes back to Tate's admiration for people who are just unapologetically themselves.
Totally.
Even if it rubs others the wrong way.
And he also mentions wanting to be on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Oh, really?
You remember he was avoiding America before his arrest for fear of becoming a target?
Right.
But now he seems ready to jump back into the fray.
It sounds like he's feeling a lot more confident.
Yeah.
Willing to have these high-profile, controversial conversations.
Okay, let's get into his political views.
Okay.
He has a certain appreciation for Trump's trolling abilities.
Trump's trolling abilities?
Yeah, particularly that whole taking Greenland comment.
Oh, right.
And his trade negotiations with Canada and Mexico. It speaks to Tate's admiration for people who disrupt the status quo.
Yeah, people who challenge the norm.
He sees humor and provocation as powerful tools.
Even if it offends people.
Even if it offends people, and he's not afraid to criticize.
Who does he criticize?
He's particularly harsh on Canadian leadership.
Like Trudeau.
Specifically Trudeau. He argues Canadians get the government they deserve because they don't resist enough.
This goes back to his philosophy of personal responsibility.
Totally.
It's not just about politics. It's about taking ownership of your life and challenging authority.
It's that whole don't be a sheep mentality.
Yeah.
That resonates with a lot of people.
Especially young men who feel like they don't have a voice.
Right, or who are disillusioned with the way things are.
He's tapping into this very real frustration and this desire for change, even if his solutions are kind of simplistic.
Or even dangerous.
Right.
And that brings us to his perspective on the Ukraine war.
Oh, boy.
Buckle up for that one because it's a doozy.
I can imagine.
Stay tuned for part 2 of this deep dive.
Okay.
Where we unpack Tate's take on the conflict, his views on legacy, and much more.
So, you know where we left off? We were about to get into Tate's take on the Ukraine war.
Yeah.
And he does not hold back.
No, he does not.
He calls it a pointless war. You know, emphasizing the huge casualties, over 700,000.
Right.
And predicts it'll be forgotten in time.
Yeah, it's a bleak outlook.
Yeah.
What really struck me was his anger. Not at the war itself, but at what he sees as this lack of motivation and gratitude from people.
Okay.
Especially in the West.
Interesting.
It's like he's contrasting the comforts of everyday life with the sacrifices and suffering of those caught in the conflict.
It's a pretty stark contrast.
Yeah, and it kind of feeds into this larger narrative he has about the decline of the West.
Right.
He points to Europe and Canada specifically blaming unchecked immigration, weak leadership, and a loss of what he calls masculine spirit.
This is where his very individualistic philosophy runs into these global issues.
Yeah. It's like he's applying that same take responsibility attitude to entire societies.
Totally.
It's almost like he's saying, look at what's happening over there, and then look at how you're living your life. Are you making the most of it?
There's definitely a moral judgment there.
Yeah.
A sense that people have become complacent.
Yeah.
Lost sight of what really matters.
And he connects this to a loss of traditional values.
Right.
Specifically those associated with masculinity, strength, resilience, a willingness to fight for what you believe in.
It's interesting because on one hand, he's promoting self-reliance and ambition.
Right.
which are generally seen as good things.
Right.
But he's framing it within this very specific ideology that's tied to these traditional gender roles and almost a romanticized view of the past.
Yeah, it's a complex mix of ideas, and I think that's what makes Tate so fascinating to analyze.
I agree.
He's tapping into these anxieties that so many people feel about societal change, economic uncertainty, the shifting roles of men and women. But he's offering solutions that are often simplistic and divisive.
Okay, so how does all this tie back into the bigger picture of Tate's worldview?
Well, I think we really start to see what drives him when he talks about legacy.
Legacy, okay.
He emphasizes the choice to die as a number or a name.
That's a powerful idea.
Right.
It's very central to his appeal.
He's essentially saying, you have a choice. You can live a life of mediocrity, be just another face in the crowd.
Yeah.
Or you can strive for greatness, make a mark on the world, and leave a legacy that will be remembered long after you're gone.
And that really resonates with young people.
Totally, especially those who feel lost or directionless.
Right. He's giving them a purpose, a mission, a reason to believe in themselves and strive for something more.
And this is where his online school comes into play.
Right. He's not just preaching these ideas. He's offering a path to achieve them.
Yeah, he's teaching his followers how to make money, build businesses, and create a life of abundance and influence.
It's like he's building an army of self-made entrepreneurs who share his values and his vision for the world.
It's both inspiring and unsettling.
It is.
Depending on your perspective. On one hand, he's empowering people to take control of their lives and achieve their dreams.
But on the other hand, he could be indoctrinating them into this very specific ideology that's fueled by ambition competition and a kind of adversarial view of the world.
He even brings in religion. Arguing that God favors those who try and make the most of what they're given.
It's interesting how he blends these different elements.
Yeah.
Traditional masculinity, entrepreneurship, religious faith into this one cohesive narrative.
Yeah. It's like he's creating a worldview that's appealing on multiple levels.
Right. It addresses material desires, but also spiritual and existential questions.
It's almost like a prosperity gospel.
A prosperity gospel.
Okay. But with a very Tatean twist.
Right.
Effort equals luck. Hard work earns God's favor.
That's a pretty seductive message.
Yeah, especially in a culture that often feels chaotic and unfair.
And it's a message that works really well online.
Yeah.
Where success is often measured in followers' likes and money.
Right.
Tate's message is perfect for that environment.
Yeah.
So it's no surprise he's found such a huge following.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
Tate's worldview is complex.
It is.
It's a tapestry of personal experience, philosophical beliefs, and some pretty controversial opinions.
Absolutely.
But what's clear is that he's resonating with a lot of people.
Yeah.
And his influence is growing.
It is.
He's a cultural phenomenon that can't be ignored.
I agree.
And I think understanding his appeal is essential for understanding the culture today.
Yeah, whether you agree with him or not, Tate's ideas are shaping the conversation.
Right.
And it's up to each of us to think critically and form our own conclusions.
So before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, there are a few more intriguing details from the interview that I think are worth exploring. So, you know how Tate was talking about wanting to blow things up while he's in Vegas? Yeah. Well, it turns out he's not just talking about his legal case. He mentions plans to go to UFC events and power slap events.
That's such a power move, right?
Yeah.
Aligning himself with these hyper-masculine, no-holds-barred kind of entertainment events.
Yeah, it's like he's saying, I'm back, I'm bigger than ever, and I'm not afraid to be in the spotlight.
Right. And don't forget his admiration for Dana White.
Oh, yeah.
Who's built this whole empire on controversy and spectacle.
Yeah, there's a definite synergy there, a shared understanding of how to get people's attention.
Totally.
And speaking of attention-grabbing figures, Tate also mentions this conversation he had with Kanye West.
Kanye West.
Yeah, even hinting at a possible collaboration.
Whoa, now that's a pairing I didn't see coming.
Two incredibly polarizing figures, each with their own huge following and a knack for stirring up controversy.
It makes you wonder what they could possibly cook up together.
Right.
A podcast, a business, some kind of art thing.
Whatever it is, it'll get people talking, good and bad.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Tate is clearly a master at using these relationships to get his message out there and expand his reach.
It's all strategic.
Yeah.
He's not just reacting to things.
Right.
He's shaping the narrative, controlling his image, building a brand that goes beyond any one platform.
And he's doing all this while he's still facing these serious legal challenges.
Yeah, that's true.
It's easy to forget he's still under investigation and has all these criminal cases going on.
Right. It adds another layer to the whole thing.
Yeah.
How do these legal issues affect his decisions?
Right.
Does he see them as obstacles or just another chance to play the victim and get his supporters fired up?
It's like he's playing this high-stakes game of chess and we're all just pawns on his board.
That's a good way to put it.
So let's zoom out for a sec and think about what we've learned from this deep dive into Andrew Tate.
Go.
He's a complex guy and controversial.
Yes, sir.
He doesn't fit neatly into any box.
He really doesn't.
He's a master of self-promotion.
Right.
A provocateur who loves pushing buttons and challenging norms.
But he's also tapping into these real anxieties and desires that resonate with so many people.
Especially young men who feel lost or disillusioned.
Right.
His message is this potent mix of motivation and manipulation.
It really is.
It appeals to both our hopes and our fears.
He offers this path to power and success.
Yeah.
But it comes with traditional values, rigid gender roles, and this worldview that often pits people against each other in this constant struggle for dominance.
Whether you love him or hate him, you can't deny that Andrew Tate forces us to ask some tough questions about masculinity, fame, and what truth even means in the digital age.
He challenges us to really think about the information we take and the influencers we follow and the values we hold.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with this one question.
Okay.
What does your legacy look like right now?
That's a good question.
Are you living as just a number blending into the background? Or are you striving to become a name to make a real impact on the world?
And are you using your time wisely?
Right?
Pursuing your passions, living according to your values? Because none of us know what tomorrow holds.
And the choices we make today will determine the legacy we leave behind.
That's something to think about for sure.
We've only scratched the surface here.
Yeah.
There's so much more Andrew Tate content out there. His online school, his interviews, his social media.
It's a whole world.
Yeah, all offering glimpses into his complex and often contradictory worldview.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep forming your own conclusions.
This is your Deep Dive After.